Good morning and welcome to Festival of Place the Pineapples. It's our third day today. It gives me great pleasure to say hello to you and tell you that this is a unique event where we bring together developers, designers, and placemakers from across the built environment to share their work as they vie to win a golden pineapple for place. The Festival of Place the Pineapples is in association with the Design Council, who have helped us shape these awards from their outset. So we're so pleased to be working with them again this year. They share our passion for design and its importance in creating safer, healthier places in the context of a climate emergency. This morning, we're going to be hearing from the shortlist for the Pineapple for Place in Progress, which seeks to recognize a place that is partway through its development cycle and has made a really promising start. This afternoon, we'll be visiting international future places, and we have a great lunchtime talk today with Bernard Hay, program design lead at the Design Council, a researcher, writer, curator, and educator who is working on the Design 21 economy, which is all about how we add up the value of design in places. Public policy. She's the previous editor-in-chief of Inside Housing and Social Housing and previous editor of Local Government Chronicle and Materials Recycling Week. So welcome, Emma. I'm going to hand it over to you, but actually Emma's connection has just dropped. So I'm going to keep going and I'm going to introduce our judges to you today. You'll be meeting them yourself after our first presenter. But for now, I'd like to say that we are joined by Pete Swift, founding director at Planet IE. We're joined by Naumczyk, community partnership officer at Falkirk Council. And we're joined by Phil Stallwood, development manager at CEG. So thank you to all of our judges. It's brilliant to have such insightful industry leaders who can actually have visited these projects, they've studied these projects, and they're here to comment on them today and ask some really questions that will deepen your experience of the projects and deepen our learning. So what I'm going to do now is, as Emma comes back to us, I'm going to introduce our first presenter for today. We're going to be traveling to the Sighthill Transformation in Glasgow. So can I welcome Greg Meikle from LDA Design to the stage? So Greg, join us. Hi, Greg.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. So I'll just let you get set up on your presentation and then you'll have 10 minutes to present and our judges will have 10 minutes to ask you questions.
Okay, thanks very much. Without further ado. Then when you can see this, if you let me know, that'd be great.
Sure. There it is. You're ready to go. You've got 10 minutes.
So Sighthill Transformational Regeneration area is located in Glasgow. It's just a 10 minutes walk from the city centre. It was very industrial driven. It had a chemical works there in the 1800s. Into the 1900s, it then had a power station, which you can see in the top right, which then went on to have one of the largest cooling towers in Europe. But this powered the Glasgow's innovative approach to the tram network. As industrial decommissioning across the UK and Glasgow happened and the housing boom hit, there was 10 high-rise tower blocks then built. The tenements made way for this that you can see in the middle image there. And that brought people and drove thousands of people to the city's edge. Unfortunately, the bottom image there on the right, there was a decision to cut Glasgow by the M8, and this severance happened and broke Sighthil away from the city centre, and there was a really strong community had formed, but this road severance really broke this down and led to poor amenities and really low quality placemaking. So crime and drugs unfortunately took hold, and poverty, deprivation, isolation, it was really disturbing. These were all associated with Sighthil. It wasn't a great place, alongside the more knowledge on its industrial past in terms of its contamination, its pollutants. It really did leave a scar on the landscape. Now, we mapped this, the journey, this graphic on the left here is like an emotional timeline through the decades, and it really peaked at the housing part in the high-rise flats, and then it dropped, recession, job losses, but it was Glasgow City Council were so determined that the next thing for the residents had to be right, and they had to have a better deal. They did actually put the area forward for a Youth Olympics Games bid, and it was unfortunately unsuccessful. But in a blessing, it was really a blessing in disguise, because what this done was allow us to have an opportunity to step back, to engage, and really think about a people-centric vision. Enliven this community once again. You give it meaning, give it purpose, make people's lives better, and not for the short term, the long term as well. And we've done this by 3 strands, and these were all influence, for the perception of place, and these were physical, these were cultural, and these were emotional, and this all fostered a strong connection between people and place. So this was an emotional map that we curated through engaging with people, talking with residents, and these physical, cultural and emotional strands all helping us understand the place and what mattered most to the people. We had some really interesting stories, and to the north there was the curling ponds. We all socialised there in the winter. There was Jack's Mountain, and that was actually an industrial slag heap that the kids would run around on in their bikes. They would dig holes, they would slide on it. They loved it, but they didn't actually understand what it was. And there was a byproduct of that which formed a lagoon, which was actually nicknamed the Stinky Ocean, because it really did stink. And then there's the cuddies, which were standing stones, and I'll touch a wee bit more again about them. I mean, well served in terms of the strong line to the left, which is a railway connecting Glasgow and Edinburgh. There was the canal, the Forth and Clyde Canal, wrapping round the south and to the west, and also rail infrastructure to the east. But it was all really interesting when we were actually looking through these and talking to people. There was one common denominator, and that was they were all experiences within the landscape. It just topped the wish list. So as we put forward a master plan, the landscape had to lead. It had to be at the forefront of this redevelopment. This was a 48-hectare site on the outskirts of Glasgow city centre, and we were proposing to deliver 30 hectares solely of green space. Now that 30 hectares was going to be delivered up front as a part of an advanced infrastructure network, which would be completed prior to any of the 850 tenure-blind homes being habitable. There's a red stripe down through the master plan here, which we call the spine. That was then reconnecting. There was a crossover here down the south at the motorway, the M8. That was going to reconnect the city, plug it back into the network there of the cities and get the job market again. Now that was an active bridge, focusing on pedestrian and cycle movement and the red route that's highlighted there. This was really part of the master plan from the get-go. There was some really big moves taken, and that was all down to ponds. So ponds were memories that were brought forward. There's always been an association with water. The neighbouring Forth and Clyde Canal, there was actually a spring fountain well. The curling ponds, everybody speaks about them and everybody has memories about them. So it was vital that water, and the ability to connect with the water formed a part of this vision. So we reimagined these as water bodies. There were burns, they were streams, they were ponds, they were lochs. Some of the images here just showing how it was actually, as one with the green. Suds, quite rightly, play such an important part in development today, and 100% of the surface water within this development is treated by the suds and then actually plugs to a smart canal system at the Forth and the Clyde. Now that smart canal system itself is an innovative project, and what that's now allowing is the water level to be controlled, and it's got wealth of benefits. It's unlocking 3,000 new homes that were previously on the land that would flood, but also big figures in terms of 30,000 tonnes of carbon coming out the atmosphere for what would have been operational. The ponds were such a huge move, but on the smaller, more intimate scale, the cuddies, which are 17 standing stones, known locally as the cuddies. Now these are astronomically aligned. They were in the late 70s. It was one of the first stone circles of its type for over 3,000 years in the UK. People spent loads of time here. School kids buried time capsules here. People found sanctuary here, and there was actually ashes and what spread of people's loved ones over time. Now, these stones were repositioned. They now form a prominent location proud on the city and Sighthill skyline. But the story of this moving was brought along with the community. We lifted the habitat, we lifted the soils, we brought everything that these sat within. The community done that with us. They helped us respread it. They helped us resow the seeds. A really nice story. Now, as a place in progress, a community needs certain facilities to flourish. So there's a new church here at Sighthill. There's a new community campus. The community campus is a library, it's a gym, it's a drop-in centre, it's a pharmacy, it's got early years education, it's got non-denominational primary education. Now, it's all under one roof, and these are all deliberately set within the landscape. They're set within the landscape to encourage everybody to engage with the landscape and experience it as part of their daily lives. You know, the campus is a civic square to the front there on the right. Now, that civic square is suitably sized to host farmers markets, arts and crafts, events, Christmas fairs, and it's all ready to work. There's all plug and play there for water and electricity for these things just to plug and play and turn up, no extra provision required. Now, we've spoke about lives, but look, green space, the spaces, we've now got a 38 hectare parkland, 10 minutes walk from the city centre. It's accessible to all. It's got an industry-leading combined green and blue infrastructure. It's got play woven through it and incidental opportunities, you know, just to make that little walk to school all the more exciting. We've got bespoke climbing frames, climbing walls, BMX tracks. You know, this just isn't for the community. People will travel far and wide to come and see these. We've got furniture throughout that's scaled so that classes can come down and sit in the park. You can gather as a group. Or there's just the single seats round about for people to sit, enjoy a coffee, watch the world go by. I mean, some of the benches are pretty large scale, and I'm sure even the skateboarders will love them. And do you know what? We've not got a problem with that. The planting as well, it's biodiverse, it's a resilient approach. We've planted over 4,000 trees of varying spec. We've planted over 100,000 potted shrubs, and we've had site-specific seed mixes lining the water bodies. We're doing everything we can to promote wildlife and biodiversity. But I mean, what's next? I mean, this really is the catalyst for change. Sighthill holds the key to the northern quarter of the city. It now has an active connection back to the M8, and this, coupled with the smart canal system, is allowing so much more to happen in the north of the city. Dundas Hill, Cowlairs, Maryhill are all seeing the benefits of this already. And early analysis has already started to show that the regeneration of Sighthill alone is generating £2.50 in the local economy for every pound of the gross project income. I mean, Sighthill is all about the people. It's had people at the heart. The journey, their involvement, it's never stopped. The project conception, the engagement, the community and the know events, they've been part of this curation. They've helped shape it. They've helped construct it. And that's never going to cease. There's another 7 years yet of residential development, and these guys are going to be there all the way. I mean, their willingness, their engagement, and even with the contractor and the community council and ourselves to date, we've 200 community members have benefited from apprenticeships, further education, mentorships, community days away, some of them even being their first time out with a Glasgow. I mean, Sighthill is all about the connection of place and people through landscape. And I mean, it really is in the name, Sighthill Transformational Regeneration Area. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Greg. Emma here. Sorry, I didn't get to meet you just before we kicked off. Apologies for those technical issues. Thanks for getting us off to a really brilliant start there, Greg. Some great stuff for us to get our teeth into. Before we kick off with some questions from the judges, just a couple of sort of housekeeping points. So loads of you have found the emojis button already. That's brilliant. It's a really nice way to show your appreciation and to encourage our speakers. So do carry on doing that as Greg is answering some questions. If you've got comments, thoughts, questions, things that you'd like to know, then do feel free to use the comments box, which is just to the side here. So there's a chat box, there's a Q&A box, so whichever is easiest, just use that to pop any questions or thoughts in that you might have. And just a reminder, in case you didn't find it, when our presenters are presenting, there's some little arrows that appear in the top corner of the screen, so you can use that just to send the presentation full screen. Hopefully you all found that. So thanks ever so much indeed, Greg. I'm going to bring our judges in now. So judges, if I could invite you to turn your cameras on, so we can see your lovely smiling faces. To brighten up our mornings. Maya, I'm going to bring you in first. I'm not sure whether Christine mentioned at the beginning, but our judges have each been to visit some of the places, and I know that Maya came along and visited Sighthill. So Maya, I'd like to bring you in first, please, for your thoughts, your reactions, and a question or two for Greg.
Absolutely, thank you, Emma. And I think I might be a little bit biased here, but I think there's a really strong sense that the city really needs this project, and projects like this, having such a kind of turbulent history of housing and communities being let down by poor quality housing and so on. So there's a real sense of hope there, and I think it's a really important project. When I was visiting, I had a chance to speak with some people who are also kind of milling about. Didn't get a chance to see the whole site because obviously it's still being built, but there's also, what I got from that is a really strong sense as well that people living around the area will really benefit from this as a route into the city, which right now is a really, really terrible experience of having to navigate kind of underpasses and bridges and walking by the motorway and all of that. So that's really, really great. I guess what I was interested in, Greg, is when the community was being engaged, and it sounds like you've got so many amazing insights and stories to kind of base designs off, but was there any kind of challenges and kind of maybe hard to reach groups, and how did you overcome those challenges in engagement?
Yeah, that's a really good question, thanks. It was always, the Sighthill community and the groups within had always felt left behind. So to get them to engage and come to the front was really difficult. And there's now been separate charities and things in the area set up, and it's been great to bring them to the forefront. But reaching out to them was done through events and actually having something within the area, almost so people would become nosy, wondering what was going on, and it would be that inquisitiveness to, do you know what, I'll go down the stairs, I'll see what's happening out the front, because there seems to be people talking about things, and that's how we started to draw people in and get people to have a conversation with us. I think, the emotional map and the timeline, we were all quite honest about that, and then how we wanted that to blossom, how we wanted Sighthill to be again, basically, and how we didn't turn up with a sheet of paper, with a master plan, with roads and parks and everything drawn on it. We literally had a blank sheet of paper, and that was basically where the emotional map that I showed earlier, that came from all these stories and getting these people around the table.
That's amazing, thank you.
Thank you very much. Pete, can I bring you in next? Some thoughts, some reaction, and a question for Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. I haven't had the joy of visiting site, but I'd love to spend some time in that park. So you've got 30 hectares up front. I'd just like to know a little bit more about what your management model is, and who looks after it, who funds that. Are the residents directly involved? Is there a friends group yet? Any of those kind of things? Yeah,
so the charities that I just mentioned there, that it kind of features all the way through, which is really good, and it's not as if this then subdivides itself into areas of looking after certain things. That everybody's kind of has a body and a care for the place as a whole. So that maybe back to the original question, the maintenance, the backup side of it has always been debatable, and local authority funds. So there was an extension to the actual management and maintenance. So that there's a 5-year maintenance period there held by the contractor to look after everything from the landscape point of view. This advanced infrastructure that's in already. So at least by then, that if there's any failures, and there's more so in the soft landscape in front, that's that will be easily sorted, and by the time it's then coming back to the local authority, the maintenance is then down to the minimal, the weeding, the cutting of the grass and things. But bringing the community along as well, it's something that we're just at the process of trying to get kind of engagement and kick-off events. Bring them down into the park now and say, here is your space. This is yours. You to do what you like with. There's visitors to come and go, but you should be proud of it and use it as a showcase at the same time. We've also been really lucky to get the school. The kids. There was previously 2 schools on site, and it's amalgamated into one in this community campus. But these guys have. The contractor actually opened up an apprenticeship course based on site, and those kids and even younger adults came, were trained up in suitable trades, and then actually some have been employed either by the main contractor or the local subcontractors and delivered some of this landscape and still have a full-time job there as well. So that ownership and guardianship, if you like, is there within the community as well. It's not a construction team that's turned up and done this and then going to, disappear overnight. So yeah, it's a really strong story as well.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks very much, Pete. Phil, over to you.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for a great presentation. Looks like a really interesting scheme and quite transformational as in its title. I think, as Pete said, it's something I'd love to come and have a look at. It looks quite credible, actually. One thing you mentioned, there seems to be a significant amount of community engagement, which is fantastic. And what I wondered is, once things are being delivered, is the kind of occupier experience being captured to kind of do a lessons learned exercise on various bits, so you can kind of improve the landscaping, the housing product through the development process?
I mean, definitely so, and I mean, it's difficult to try and summarise this in 10 minutes. It's been it's nearly an 8 or a 9 year project endeavour for LDA, and it was difficult to get all this down. But yeah, so there's an existing residential that was delivered to rehome the people that were in the flats that quite rightly didn't want to move anywhere else, and then obviously there's a new 850 10-year blind alongside Keep Moat Homes that are pushing that through with Glasgow City. But yeah, as that pushes through, there's still lessons learned to be had, and it was kind of back, I suppose, to kind of what Pete and Maja was saying as well, that there is that existing community there, and the chance for them to cross over with the new residents and still have that ownership and the lessons learned obviously. They hold the key. There's residents there in that existing residency that have been there since day one when the high-rise flats were there, the older generation, and the regeneration and that coming up through is really good. And in terms of the house scale and that development as well, it's all been put together in a way. Head by Keep Moat and Collective Architecture are in there as well. It's a great team, and that. It's all been scaled to allow, if somebody might need to move in and have a 1-bed apartment, but if they then have a family and move on, they can move within the community and move their way around. So, yeah, the lesson learned is always there at the same time in the background, and that community engagement through through these charities and the bodies that are set up continue, and the new residents are also asked to be a part of that.
That's great, thanks, Greg. And is there any key kind of things that have been kind of incorporated in the ongoing design from that kind of feedback?
For us, it was it's a huge scale of a place. Some of the images maybe didn't do it justice, and this 30 hectares of park is massive, and you can quite quickly get lost in the scale of that. So the importance to have these smaller spots, small spaces where you could stop and dwell. And we've got little areas we kind of call, herbaceous gardens, or the woodland walk. These are kind of more garden level, if you like, high planting densities and just pockets of seating and interactive things and amongst there. And so people can just sit and experience that. And, if they're needing just time away from the house or want to go a little walk, and can sit there and watch the world go by, but you don't need to be in the midst of the bustle of a city centre park, if you like. So that was something that it was almost finding that middle ground in terms of the scale of somebody's private back garden, front garden, but being into a public space, but not being wide open in a public space, to almost just encourage that through and up into the bigger areas, the kickabout areas and the play parks and things like that.
Great. Thanks, Greg.
Great. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you very much indeed, Greg. That brings us actually quite neatly to the close of our question and answer slot. So thank you so much to Greg and to our judges for their questions. I think it's going to be a really tough morning. We've had a really brilliant start and some excellent projects yet to come as well, I'm sure. So thank you very much indeed, Greg.
Thank you.
It's now time to move on to our next presentation, which is from Barking Riverside, Barking and Dagenham. Barking Riverside is a significant mixed-use development sitting alongside 2 kilometres of the Thames River frontage in East London and consists of 10,000 homes over 443 acres, completion expected within 15 years. So I'm really pleased to welcome our presenters, Sarah McCready and Matthew Carpen. Welcome. You have 10 minutes to persuade our judges. So over to you, take it away.
Morning, thanks everyone. Sarah's going to share the screen. She brings up the slide deck. I'll just introduce myself. My name is Matt Carpen. I'm the Managing Director at Barking Riverside, and Sarah's joined me as Head of Placemaking and Communications for the team. We're delighted to be part of this event, and honoured to see the other shortlisted candidates for the award. So it's fantastic to have us present to you, and we'll take you through what is one of the most challenging projects, and also exciting. It's and the scale of it you'll see in a second. We're going to tell you a little bit about the context. Sarah, are you sharing the slides? Emma, I just want to check you can see the slides.
Hi, sorry. We're having a bit of trouble finding the slide. The slide deck isn't coming up on the screen. It was yesterday when we did the run through, so just bear with me.
No worries. No problem. So if you click the little present to audience button at the bottom, and then which one are you clicking on from there?
We're trying to share the we're sharing the window. When we select that option, it's just the slide deck isn't on the list. Let me try again. Sorry, I've just reopened it.
If you're having trouble, you can try just sharing your entire screen. That sometimes works for people better.
Don't panic. There's always a few little glitches. It doesn't take away from it.
It's not saying the slide deck is there in the sharing tray when I present to audience. Apologies for this. Let's try again. Oh, here we go. It should be, is that coming up now?
Not just yet, but it may do in a second. Sometimes it takes a couple of seconds for it to kick in.
Hey, Sarah, it's Simon from the developer. Did you try, if that doesn't work for you, if you try share screen and then you do entire screen instead of window, that's worked better for some people.
Okay. Oh, here we go.
Ah, lovely.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, guys. Sorry about that, Emma.
No
Sorry,
problem.
judges. So, Barking Riverside JV with the Mayor of London and L&Q, and it's located in East London. Next slide, Sarah. We'll take you through the social context. The East London. So this image shows the site in the foreground. In the background, you can just about see Canary Wharf and the River Thames. And just take that image and the image of the Thames and how quiet it is there, because we'll talk about that in a minute. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the railway which runs into Fenchurch Street. And this project's a joint venture which has got planning permission for 10,800 homes, a new railway, a new boat service, and a new town centre. And it's it's former industrial land, former power station, one of the sisters to Battersea and Kingston, if you know London power stations and the history, which closed in the 1980s. So it's was heavily contaminated part of London with quite deprived community. And if you think of the EastEnders map, those of you who watched EastEnders, we're just on the right-hand side, just about in the shot. And I came to this area about 7 or so years ago, and one of the things that struck me was just the interesting people and the ambition that sits in this part of London. And Sarah's going to take you through a little bit of that social context.
So one of the pre-defining sort of characteristics of Barking Riverside's current social context is our resident population, who give this place so much of its character. This is brownfield land, as Matt has said, which means there are existing communities, neighbouring communities on and off our site who we want to work with equitably in partnership. The area historically has been perceived as incredibly deprived. If you look at the index of multiple deprivation, it's in the top 10% of most deprived communities in England. But actually, from this historic hardship, communities have always felt strongly connected to one another. They've been very enterprising, and they've started a range of sort of social assets and enterprises. In the film that's just played, you would have seen 3 of our female social business entrepreneurs who work at Barking Riverside, one of whom is Oyen, who leads a fair trade cocoa cooperative from her home at Barking Riverside.
And the river is one of the things that we're really quite focused on. It's probably one of London's most underutilised open spaces. It's quite hard to access it, but just if you think back to that image of how quiet the River Thames is, and that applies, I guess, across all sorts of development projects. Access to that as an asset, it's been lost in a generation in this part of London, and it's something that, as a strategy, we're really focused on in terms of providing access and working with the Port of London Authority and the Environment Agency to get people onto the Thames, or at least appreciate where it is in the context of where they live. Sarah, back to you.
So hopefully we've been able to demonstrate why the social and physical assets already at Barking Riverside make this a place to be, but really we're interested in creating a place to become. How does our partnership, our investment, help evolve the place in a sustainable way? And so we're now going to take you through some of the interventions we think that typify this.
So to underpin what we're doing here in terms of creating a new piece of London, if you like, it needs investment, and it needs investment in transport infrastructure. So the 2 bits that have been fundamental in terms of improving accessibility for the movement of people, goods, services, two areas in particular. One is the riverboat. So there is a riverboat service that runs along the Thames, run by Thames Clipper, now called Uber Boats, and we've secured a deal to extend the service out to this part of East London. And from March next year, we've just started constructing it. It will be launching an AM and PM peak service for visitors, for residents, for anyone in the area to use the service. Secondly, the rail extension, which comes to the heart of the site, and this is seven or so years in conversation. First had a conversation with it about seven and a half years ago, and it's now due to complete next year. There's a shot of it there, but it's so important to that ability to invest in an area, in place, in facilities, in services, and in people, and that underpins that whole model. And it's quite a quick turnaround. It sounds long, but 7 years from start, the first time we talked about it, to actually it being open. And I'm pleased to say it's on programme.
Another intervention we want to talk to you about is the Wilds Ecology Centre. The Wilds is a brand new cultural community and events hub opening at Barking Riverside this Saturday. And actually the Wilds is focused on knitting together various community uses into a hybrid. And we know these sorts of facilities are going to be increasingly important to communities in a post-pandemic world. The Wilds is a really different sort of community asset. It's different via design. Hopefully you can see we've really thought about how the building looks, but more importantly, it's different through its activation, its curation, and its programming. We've worked exclusively with a community charity who are running a free program of ecological and sustainability focused events for local people in the building. And we've invested directly in social businesses to provide amenities in the ground floor of the facility. Grounded, a brand new coffee shop, will open, and this will be run by residents for a local cooperative. We also know that as well as big bits of infrastructure, some of that smaller cultural programming is just as important when it comes to building communities with purpose, belonging and pride. And this is why we run a free programme of events annually at Barking Riverside. These range from smaller resident-led initiatives all the way up to bigger programmes. The still that you can see here is an image from Barking Riverside Presents Laserlight Synths. This was an event we led just before the pandemic where 600 people came to Barking Riverside to play synthesizers. These synthesizers shot lasers and music into the sky above the Thames, and these sorts of events are so important in terms of those community building work streams that we run.
And this is slightly a bit more further afield, but I've never in my 17 years been to a nice bin store until now. And this is where we've invested massively in vacuum waste collection, which is a technology that's been on the continent for over 60 years, first introduced in Wembley in London. And we're going to be rolling out. This is really great for recycling, and the data capture we can get on recycling is massive and has already shown us 30 or 40% improvement on people's recycling.
When it comes to our interventions, we're prepared to finesse them and take our time if we think that's going to deliver the right outcomes for our community. So in this image, you can see a CGI from the Barking Riverside Health and Leisure Hub. We're looking into the pool hall here, and this is due to be delivered in 2024. Whilst 2024 sounds like it's in the future, we've actually already been working for 3 years with our partners to secure £14 million of additional investment into this facility. And it's that £14 million that has allowed us to elevate the specification of the centre to this really destinational, forward-thinking wet leisure offer. And we've done this, we've sought that investment because we recognise this is the right sort of placemaking and social impact outcome for our community. So hopefully that's given you a flavour of the type of interventions we're doing to create a place to become at Barking Riverside. But really from a placemaking perspective, we're invested in creating a place with belonging. And actually feeling, I think, genuine belonging to a community in London is increasingly rare as London becomes more transient. We think belonging is really linked to a place that is impactful, that changes your life for the better. And so we're going to talk through 2 projects now that are really focused on the long-term legacy and impact at Barking Riverside. One of these is Thames Futures. Thames Futures is a bespoke social impact assessment framework for Barking Riverside. We appointed 4 in-house community researchers who spoke to over 400 people to create a community vision for social impact. We're now committed to monitoring our performance against agreed metrics to this vision and reporting our progress annually. Creating this level of accountability, transparency and collaboration in regards to social impact is really rare in regards to our industry. And we think this demonstrates the level of kind of corporate importance we've put on this as a business.
And then finally, it's the legacy of the estate and the area. So the land won't be adopted, the public spaces won't be adopted by the council. So we're creating a community interest company with a charitable arm as well. We're looking to set that up in March next year to manage the estate, and that will have resident board members on. And the reason for that is partly because you need that custodian, long-term custodian of the area, but also when we saw investing in the residents to help do co-design of certain areas like parks, some of the smaller parks, and some of the other projects that we're doing, you see that the importance that people attach to things that they are part of is really the sort of winner in terms of that community engagement and ownership. So that sort of wraps up the presentation, but this stuff, it's really challenging on a scale, at this scale, and even listening to Greg's presentation, that engagement is so important and it does take time. So thank you for listening, and we're happy to take questions, Emma.
Thank you ever so much. Really fantastic. I was fortunate enough to visit 2, maybe 3 years ago, and I can see a huge amount of progress since the time that I was there. Just fantastic to see. And I also remember, I don't think the vacuum recycling facility was quite up and running, but I do remember one of the councillors talking to me very excitedly about it. And actually, I used to edit a recycling publication, so I can claim a definite geeky interest in that. Really fantastic. I'm going to bring Phil in first, I think, because I think Phil has had the opportunity, the privilege of visiting. So I'm sure he'll have some observations and maybe 1 or 2 questions for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Matthew and Sarah, for the presentation. I visited the development last week, and It's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think you really have to visit it to really get the scale of the development and its ambition to deliver much needed housing to London. I mean, it's huge, and you've made a cracking start to what's as you approach it, what appears to be a good quality development. So I was really impressed, and it's great to see also the NVAC system. I've spent a fair bit of time in Sweden, and it's a very popular system out there, and it's great to see you guys employing it on such scale. Actually, I'm quite interested to see how reliable it is. Actually, I wonder. Yeah. But that's another question. But what I was wondering is the district heating system as well is another fantastic initiative. And I wondered, outside the NVAC and the district heating system, what other sustainable technologies you're employing across the site, and what the future plan is as we kind of head towards net zero. And you're on a long development program. Is kind of what the overall strategy, but what direction you're kind of heading in?
It's a really topical question, actually, Phil. We met with the BRL board last week to get the steer on the direction of travel. We've got, as you say, we've got district network, which is gas-fired, would have been a gas-fired CHP, but with the carbon credit change in the legislation, that isn't going to be viable for us on this scale. So we've just launched a piece of work which is going to look at combination of technologies, which is either links to tidal, potentially links to waste, heat from waste. We've also got heat coming out of the swimming pool. So we've got an ESCO which we've set up with L&Q, who's one of the shareholders, who's running that piece of work going forward. But the first sort of test is to reduce the consumption of heat through the fabric and the efficiency of the buildings. And it's good that you've seen. I would recommend anyone go and visit the site, because you'll sort of gauge that we're designing or trying to design high quality buildings, probably in a zone 1 value proposition in a zone 4, where the value doesn't really stack up. So the values, it's very good value to look at Barking Riverside, because what you get for your money in terms of design, but also quality is sort of more where you'd expect higher value proposition in central London. But hugely challenging in the carbon test for us. And we've got, I reckon, at least another 2 years of development before we pin to the specific technology.
On some of those sustainability initiatives, I think also there are the big bits of infrastructure, which Matt has just spoke through, but we have a community who we're partnering with who are really interested in sort of innovating in this area. So we've put some funding into a hydroponics cooperative to help grow food locally in Barking Riverside. That's going to be based at our ecology centre. At the moment, we're doing a project with River Clay to see if there's something that we can do in regards to that to help with sort of some of these sustainability projects. So I think it's having a really multi-pronged approach and thinking about the big interventions, but what are those interventions at human scale that also really matter to local people?
Great, thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Pete, can I bring you in next? Have you some observations and perhaps a question?
I was desperate to ask a question about lasers. It was the most Austin Powers bit of judging presentation ever. So I would definitely have loved to have been there for the community craftwork concert. I've got a whole list of, unlike Phil, I haven't had a chance to go, which it's on the list. I guess of all the questions I've got, I did want to ask one about biodiversity and about, you made a statement, Matthew, at the outset that either the connection of the fabric was lost in a generation, and I think what's interesting is you've got a project that even its delivery phase will span a generation, if not more, probably 2 generations, I would think. How far back do you have to go to go forward? In other words, you've got your wilds as a kind of as a building, as a sort of beacon and a structure to engage people with, and you've already started programs and really embedding the local community in what you're doing. But do you have anybody as part of your team who's going to help take those people backwards to come forwards? Because I think we know that a lot of the ecosystems that have been lost or damaged across the country were actually still there in living memory. They're, when the previous Sighthill project, people living there that used to be there when the tower blocks were there. Have you found any good ways, if you like, of digging back through the history books and the generation to maybe give you some clues as to what you should be putting back there from an ecology?
I think I got most of that, Pete. I'll the question. So the site had been derelict for probably from the 80s when the power station closed. And if you imagine the swathe of land there, it's about 448 hectares of land. It's absolutely phenomenal, and it's been left to its own devices. So we've when we started looking at the master plan, we've got ecologists on site. We have to, and to capture the data set, not only the current data, but to try and understand how the legacy of the contamination, but also how we protect some of those habitats that have found themselves on site. I mean, this used to be a marshland, but the land is now made ground, and that happened sort of between the 80s and today. So it's been raised at certain areas up to 12 to 14 meters, and that's to deal with the flood levels. But the bit that's largely untouched is on the front, with a few ditches that run through it in between the sites. So we've got, our biggest, perhaps most important species on site is the water vole, and we annually, if we do any work, we have to catch these little beautiful little things, send them to Devon on holiday, where they breed. It costs us a lot of money, and it's a bit like an 18 to 30s holiday package. They go away, they come back, about 40 or 50 of them. We caught about 3 of them. So and we have to then release them into a protected habitat space that we've designed as part of the landscape. And actually, we're LDA, Greg's team, and another part of doing the design work for us. And we've delivered the biggest bit of habitat in the last 2 years on site, and the water vole population is absolutely thriving, and they are very territorial, so we can't go near them. You can't actually go near them, but what we do is when we do trap them to send them away, we do a lot of engagements with the schools, and the wilds ecology is sort of the pinpoint where we can start to do education, but also develop strategy. You're right, the construction phase is really challenging, because we will have to, the phasing of it, making sure that any of the habitats, or particularly the nesting birds that like to nest on flat ground, that we're doing our works, whether it's remedial works or construction works, at certain points and times in the year when we're not disturbing. So the coordination, you're right, is quite challenging, but sort of almost is embedded in the program. Don't know if that picks up on your question fully, Pete.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Maja, we've got time for a super quick question if you have one that is burning.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Emma. I think it's a really ambitious project. There's so many different kind of aspects to it, and I was just wondering, for a quick question, maybe an example of some of the ways the inputs that you'd had from the community, maybe something surprising or something that's influenced your design in some way, if you wanted to tell us a bit more about that.
Oh, we've done one of the things that we've it's been so I think rewarding for us as a team is that the residents when we met, were, I guess, no investment in this area at all over the last sort of 20 to 30 years, and you suddenly put yourself out there, and it's a kind of mixture of amazement, anger, and joy, all sort of wrapped into one. So we've found some just incredible residents who have helped us design some of our events. And Sarah, I don't know if you want to pick out one in particular. I mean, for me, the biggest one that we do now, which is probably the biggest event in the borough, is the annual display that we do on the fireworks, which we're now sort of pushing over to residents. And you know that, I mean, the last time we did it before the pandemic, it was just full of kids. I mean, it was just that, you know, I think we had up to nearly 2,000 people come, of which I'd say 80% were children who'd probably never seen a firework display in their life. But we're trying to get that co-design piece. I didn't understand what co-design until I met Sarah, actually. Co-design is a big part of what we're bringing forward as a business, and Sarah leads on that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that on some of our more kind of program-led initiatives, so events or individual co-design workshops around a certain building, we'll always have lots of people who are really interested, who want to participate, and who will then play a meaningful role in sort of shaping that project. So like that health hub I showed, there has been a co-design project that's worked on that from sort of day one the whole way through. But actually what I think is really unique about this community is the level of strategic insight and responsibility they want in shaping the place. It's not just about like the shopping list of requests, you know, we want a swimming pool, or, you know, we want a riverboat. It's about how do I make sure that I'm embedded in the long-term custodianship of the project. And so projects like Thames Futures that allow them to set the vision and make us accountable to that, or allow them via the work with the community interest company to actually be on the board that gives the legacy stewardship for the place. I think that's what's so different and so I think impressive about the community, and it will ensure that we have that feedback loop with residents, not just on individual projects, but more strategically throughout the whole of the scheme.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great place to draw us to a close. Thank you very much indeed to Sarah and Matthew and to our judges. It's now time to take a short comfort break. So grab a cuppa. I reckon you can probably leave your emails to wait though. We've got a short break until we're back and you don't want to miss the next sessions. So in between sessions, feel free to pop out and join the table in the social lounge, meet some of the other people who are here. We'll be back at 11 sharp here, ready to hear from our next two projects. So thank you very much and see you there.